And hold on one sec. There it is. All right, everyone. Nice to meet you. Julio Pilier, Housing Development Officer at DND. Also a colleague with Shami's colleague, and I'll be talking about Blue Hill Ave in a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you, Julio. And last but not least, my staff.
How's it going? My name is Josh. I am the Community Outreach Coordinator, and I work under Kyra.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dalia De Silva, and I'm the community product. Our goal for creating the open space is basically to identify the open space and the opportunity and to create awareness in the community and activity and just overall neighborhood pride.
Yeah, so just to talk a little bit about Love Your Block, our main mission is to transform physical landscapes with social programming to highlight our communities. And one aspect of Love Your Block is we offer mini grants, usually in the springtime, but as of COVID, we've paused it, but we begin to resume in the fall. And these grants are up to $3,500 to any resident, neighborhood group, or nonprofit, and any other project that align with our mission. And over the past 5 years, we have funded over 20 projects.
And to speak about like the neighborhood cleanups, so basically we have different tactical initiatives that help promote the benefits and the long-term impact of the cleaning of the neighborhoods. And as well as we provide tools and services to help make Boston shine. And we do that through the beautification and open spaces. We also have Adopt a Block, which is basically to encourage residents to participate within their community. And they do that by helping, just coming out to help clean. And we have the block parties, which are small fundings that go towards engagements in the communities. But they're on hold for now, and they'll open up spring to fall based on the schedule. In the picture below is just a recent cleanup that we had in Rosendale. It was a good turnout, and a lot of the residents, they really loved it and appreciated us coming out to help them. And just on the right is just a diagram, just illustrating past in the litter campaign, just past cleanups. And it happened in 2020, and it's just illustrating the number of volunteers and just showing the different amounts of bags picked up based on the amount of volunteers that we had turned out. You can see Roxbury on there multiple times, showing you that it's possible for more than one neighborhood to keep to request a cleanup.
Thank you, Makai. Next up, I'll talk a little bit about some of our past projects. So as stated, Love Your Block started off as a Bloomberg philanthropy grant that we had won now well over 5 years ago. And so that is where we started our mini grant program. And under Mayor Walsh, we adapted it to be a part of the city of Boston. And that is where it stands now. So we are able to offer that citywide. And so here are some of our past projects where I felt like we really activated some spaces and transformed them. So we have Eggleston Square, where we just did some simple gardening and really transformed what that area looked like. And that was back in 2016. We also have here on the right is the Curtis Goud Elementary School, and this is in East Boston. And so this was a school garden project, and it's still operating to this day. And so one great thing about the Love Your Block mini grants is that after a year, so not the direct year, next year, but after it has been a year that your project has been in place, you can apply again for some additional funding through Love Your Block. Obviously, they're very small mini grants, but we do have a touch-up grant, as we call it, to kind of give some more money, because we know that this is very much so resident-led, teacher-led, and that all funding sources are appreciated. And right here in the middle, some of you may be familiar with it. It is the Columbia Road Underpass, as I call it. And this is one of our current open spaces that we would love to transform. And we have been having discussions for about 3 years now with different ways that we can kind of make this more vibrant, stop the illegal parking from happening underneath it, as well as make some very well needed infrastructure changes. There's flooding going on in the area that's affecting the residents and the businesses. And it's just, it's underutilized space. And so this is something that our office is actively thinking about and looking for partnerships from. And as you guys will learn from the other departments, a lot of this is able to come to fruition through residents, right? So being resident-led and having that request and support there, because you guys are the ones, we are all the ones that live with it every day. And so if it's not something that you would want to see there, we don't want to put it there. So keep an eye out for that if this is within your neighborhood. We also have another project, which is not pictured, which is 40 to 48. I hope that's the number, Shawnee. 40 to 48 Geneva Ave, which is right across from the Burke School and the Grove Hall Library. And that project has been in the works for myself as far as activation for the past 7 years. And we have been looking to really kind of transform that, and through partnerships and the residents coming out and supporting that, and the interdepartmental support of Parks and D&D, we have really been able to kind of get this project and some CPA funding and bring that vision to life, hopefully one day soon. So you can that's another project you can keep an eye out. And with that being said, I'm going to turn it on over to Shawnee.
Hi, everyone. My name is Shawnee Fletcher. I'm the program manager of the Grassroots Open Space Program at the Department of Neighborhood Development. You may know the Department of Neighborhood Development as the Affordable Housing Department of the city. And my program is actually not focused on housing. It's a small part of the agency that's not focused on housing. I focus on helping people develop community gardens, farms, food forests, and other open spaces on city land. And that's what I'm going to talk about today, that process. So we have federal money that we help people get access to, and then city land that the Department of Neighborhood Development has in its inventory. And then I provide technical assistance to people navigating the process. Next slide, please. So the process of acquiring land in the city is a pretty complicated one. And like I said, my job is to help people make their way through it. But the first step is always community engagement. So if you have an idea of something you'd like to see a community garden started on a parcel of land, or a food forest, which is basically like a small orchard for the neighborhood, you would start by talking to, abutters of whatever the site is that you're interested in. If you see a vacant lot in your neighborhood and you want to turn that into a garden, you start doing community engagement. And you can certainly reach out to us in the beginning and say, hey, we're interested in possibly putting a garden here. But what we'll always say is that the most important thing is that the neighborhood wants that there, wants that land to be used that way. So that's the first step in being able to create a project like this. And besides immediate abutters, the people who live right next door, you also will need to be, building relationships with and making sure that other neighbors are interested, and also making sure that you're talking with the neighborhood association so that they're in the loop too. And then once we know that there's been some conversations in the neighborhood, and it's not, sort of out of the blue, we'll hold an official community meeting, which is part of our process. Okay, next slide. The actual process of owning a piece of land, if you're have a neighborhood group or a nonprofit organization and you want to start a garden, like I said, that's just the simplest example, on a piece of land and have it be owned by your organization, there's a whole process you have to go through. That is a big piece of how it's organized, or why it's organized the way it's organized, is because there were laws put in place in the 90s to prevent corruption, so that, you know, if my brother wants to start a farm on a piece of land, I can't just like say, hey, sure, here, have this, right? There has to be what we call a request for proposals process. And what that basically means is, once we know that the community is in support of a certain parcel of land, which is what we call like the way that land is organized is by parcel. Once we know that the community is in support of that parcel being like a garden or a farm or something, then we will issue what's called, like I said, a request for proposals. And we then wait for organizations to apply to own the land and tell us how they want to create the garden or the farm. And chapter 30, I have chapter 30B on that slide there. That's the law that directs our process. Once we have proposals, we have an internal selection process, and then we make a recommendation to the Public Facilities Commission. And the land itself is sold for $100 a parcel if the project has like a public benefit. So any kind of sort of passive open space use that's not going to be a city park, or any food producing open space that's like for community use, like as long as you're not trying to keep it for yourself and you're, you know, just you and your friends, then we can usually sell the land for $100 a parcel. It can often take a lot of money to develop, especially like a garden or a farm. And if you need to add a water connection, that's expensive, but the actual land itself is not expensive. Then there's a couple of stages of a process with the Public Facilities Commission, because they are the ones who make the decision about sale of property. And so I work with neighborhood groups to navigate that process. Like I said, I won't go into all those details now, but you can reach out to me and get more information about that process. And that can take, from the beginning of like having an idea to when a garden is like up and running, can take anywhere from like 12 to 18 months. This website, boston.gov/building housing, is where you can find the parcels that are in the Department of Neighborhood Development inventory that might be available to be a garden or a farm in your neighborhood or whatever neighborhood you're looking at. So definitely write that down and check that out. Next slide, please. Thanks, Julio. Julio put it in the chat. So then money is the other big resource that we offer at the Grassroots program. And most of our funds get distributed in association with land acquisition, meaning in terms of, if you're applying to buy a parcel of land in the RFP, we will usually put, that we're offering it with also $75,000 or $100,000 to develop the garden or the farm or the food forest. Only 501c3 organizations can receive funds, and those funds can only be spent on capital expenses, which means like building something, replacing something. In most cases, if you're starting a new project, you'd be like, sort of building from the ground up, and that's what capital funds are for. The funds can also only be used in low to moderate income neighborhoods, and that's something you can always check with me about whether it qualifies under the census if you're looking at a certain site. We also, those rules apply to our main source of funding, which is the federal funding. We also will soon have some Mayor's Youth Council funding available with projects, and that money can only be spent in Roxbury, Dorchester, or Mattapan, and those are for new farms or gardens. And then we also have funding available for projects not on city land. So not on land that D&D has in its inventory. So if you have, if you want to start a community garden on school property, or on the property of a branch of the library, or on private property, you can apply for funding from the Department of Neighborhood Development through the Grassroots Funding RFP. And I'm sorry, I don't have that link here. Julio, if you can find that, it's in my signature. You can put that there. And that is one where you can apply also for up to $100,000 for capital funds. Oh, that's supposed to say 501c3s. I had a typo there. But it can be private or public land, just not in our inventory. So that's up now, and the deadline is you can apply anytime up until May 31st, and it's first come, first serve. And then we'll have it again available after July 1. And then we also work with CPA. So a lot of times people will apply for CPA funds, which is the Community Preservation Act. There are open space funds available through that department, and through that act and that committee. And we work very closely with them to help advise and consult on projects on DND land. Yeah, next slide. And the last thing I'll say, I wanted to add one other thing that wasn't in here. Oh yes, I wanted to say this is Julio's going to speak about this Blue Hill Avenue action plan in a moment. But one thing that's related to that, but is also applicable to other parts of the city, is that it's also possible to do an activation on an open space parcel for something temporary. So if you have something where you want to plant flowers in your neighborhood or do some other kind of more short-term project on open space, you can reach out to me about that as well, because we do offer licenses, temporary use licenses. So you could have like a license for 6 months to a year to do some kind of open space project that's not like a permanent project. Yeah, and I don't know when you want to take questions, Kyra, but maybe Julio can speak on this first, and then whatever you think.
That sounds good to me. I think we're doing good on time.
Great.
Okay. All right, I'll try to be brief, be cognizant of time. But thank you, Shani. That was actually really good. So I think that's a really good summary of what we do at DND, or at least on the development side of DND. There's obviously other resources that the department offers as well, some of which include, foreclosure prevention and landlord-tenant dispute mediation and home buying assistance. So there are a lot of things that DND does, and all of that can be found on our website as well. So on the other side of the development, that we get involved in, really at the heart of that is land disposition. So what we're talking about on the Blue Hill Avenue Action Plan is essentially 30 city-owned parcels that we're looking at across the corridor, all the way, across the avenue from Mattapan to Roxbury. We started this process about, I want to say, a year and a half ago, where we basically did an assessment of all the land. We met internally to figure out, what would be the best uses. And then we reached out to the community, and we did that in a number of ways. We did that through walking tours, we did that through surveys, community meetings. We also made sure to work with some of the other agencies that are also looking at Blue Hill Avenue, which includes the Transportation Department and the EPDA, and even things like the Franklin Park Action Plan. So we really wanted to make sure that whatever we did with these parcels was in line with what the community has expressed or what they want to see. Essentially, there hasn't really been many investments in Blue Hill Avenue since I think Menino was the last time there was a really big Blue Hill Avenue initiative. And that was one of the things that led to the development of Grove Hall. So we know that this works, and we know that there are really good things that can come out of these plans that benefit the community. So what we did, when we started this process, was basically break up these 30 parcels into 4 digestible groups. We did that based on location, so proximity to each other, and also sort of like what neighborhood groups would be impacted by this development. And then we basically met with those folks throughout the planning process to make sure that we capture the requirements for the RFP correctly. Right now, we've already sort of done the initial community meetings where we would gather requirements and meet with community members to hear feedback. Now we're at the point where we are working on the first RFP, which is going to be the B1 RFP, and those are 10 parcels on the Mattapan end of Blue Hill Avenue. And then what we plan to do is basically, once we finish or release the RFP, which we expect to be out within the next month or so, we will move to the remaining parcel groups, and we'll engage with those neighborhoods as we release the RFP as well. So we really want to bring in folks. We want to include, all the groups, minority contractors. A big push of this is to promote equity and inclusion. I know that that's a big conversation in the city and across the country right now. But we really want to make sure that we are deliberate about the way that we, one, do our marketing, but also the people that we want to be involved. And it really goes back to creating that equity for not just smaller developers and contractors, but for business owners and other folks who are basically, being pushed out of the city because of rents or things like that. So there's a lot of information on the website. I'm going to link it in the chat. Feel free to visit it, go through all the information that's on there. And if you have any questions, you can email me or give me a call. And my information is on the screen, but you can also get it on the website as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Julio and Shawnee. So everyone, we will allow for questions, particularly pertaining to Shawnee, because she has to jump off for another meeting. And so we want to give you guys opportunities to get direct answers from her. Otherwise, I believe Julio will hang out and answer as best he can, but it will be from a more of a, broader scope. And then we will always kind of connect you back with Shawnee if you have any additional questions. So if anyone does have a question for Shawnee, if you could either raise your hand or go ahead and unmute yourself.
Maybe I was so thorough, there are no questions. Oh, Jeff has a question.
I'll ask a quick question. Yeah. And after you dispose of a certain piece of land, to sell it, give it to whoever is going to use it, does the city track usage in any way? Like, do you guys have an idea of how many gardens there are? Like, is there any data on that front available?
We have some like compiled data that an intern did a couple years ago that has like a good picture of what the grassroots program has done over the last several years. And we're working on getting that live on the website in like a map form. But in terms of sort of like making sure that people are doing what they said they would do, we mostly right now only have the capacity to respond if we hear from neighbors or something that somebody's trying to build a house where there was a garden or something like that, which we, very occasionally we hear people worried about things like that. We do have, when we sell land, we do have what's called a reverter clause. So if the land that we sell land, I didn't mention this before, but with an open space deed restriction. So land, it has to be at least for 30 years with an optional 20, has to be kept open space and ideally permanently. And so if someone is using it, if the organization goes defunct or it's not taken care of, or it's used for something other than the purpose that was put in the deed, then we can actually take the land back and redispose of it. So that's one of the sort of fail safes we have, but we don't, at this point, the grassroots program is me. I'm the only staff person on it. So it's not easy to do sort of like compliance of the like 70 or 80 gardens we've created over the last 20 years.
Yeah, I wasn't even thinking about compliance. I was thinking about that 70 to 80 number. That's really, that's awesome to have.
Yeah, there's a lot. And most of the gardens that you see around the city were built on land that came through the Department of Neighborhood Development. Yeah.
Thank you, Jeff and Shawnee. I don't see any other questions.
Okay, great. Thanks, everyone. Sorry I have to go, but thanks to all my colleagues at the city doing this awesome work. I can't wait to watch the recording later.
Awesome. Thank you.
Bye.
All right, next up, we have Jacob.
Thanks so much. I'm Jacob Wessel, folks. I'm a public realm director with the City of Boston's Transportation Department. So I lead up sort of some initiatives to transform our streets and sidewalks into spaces for people and spaces that we rethink about how they're designed from your sort of traditional asphalt street that's very auto dominated and then often pretty small and narrow sidewalk. So when we think about streets as spaces, right, more often I think when we talk about public space, folks turn their attention to parks or community gardens or things of that nature. But if you think about about all the space that's in the control of the City of Boston government, the majority of it, over 55% of it, is our streets and sidewalks. So with government being that entity that controls land on behalf of its constituents and all of you, we have a lot of opportunity and a lot of space that we have sort of sole control over how it could be used or not used. And so in order to figure out how to change public space in neighborhoods across the city of Boston, both in residential areas, but particularly in areas, in Main Streets districts, areas with sort of a mix of residential and commercial. We established this document called the Tactical Public Realm Guidelines, which is sort of, this is sort of an overview here, which sort of sets up a few different programs that allow for art to be placed on the streets, to allow for space to be taken away from vehicles, and made into more flexible pedestrian spaces, but using materials like planters and paint and tables and chairs and things like that. So instead of your typical big construction project that you might see, like the project that Julio referenced BTD working on Blue Hill Ave, this is something that happens much quicker, and we can do in a way that if it doesn't work out well, we can always just take off the planners and paint over the paint. So it's a real nice way to do some trial and error. Next slide. And so this is a demonstration of sort of what you can do with paint and planters and things like that. So this is Harrison Ave in Chinatown, where there was this street that's overly wide, and Chinatown also an area where there's sort of limited open public space beyond those traditional, but there are plenty of streets that have parking and some automobile movement. And so this space, Phillips Square Plaza, we painted the street, added seating like tables and sort of some curvy kind of furniture here, which was actually good because we've also tested it out and are looking to do some different types of furniture next time around that maybe has some seating that has more backs to it, and learn from the process. But the idea is we didn't need to get any cranes or bulldozers or anything like that. And it didn't take, this was built out in 2 weeks. And so while we did do some planning for about 2 years to get to this, now we're starting to whip out projects like this much quicker. And we are looking for locations that are similar to this, a vehicular space where this is a space where there didn't necessarily need to be the, if you can see on the photo, the before photo, the space wasn't necessarily essential to vehicle movements or anything like that. So right now we're still trying to find our low-hanging fruit in areas across the city where it's really simple and easy to start closing off places to vehicles. But as the program grows, as people are more hungry for public space, and folks are maybe a little changing some mindsets about wanting these types of spaces over things like parking and driving areas, we hope to sort of be a bit more aggressive and really do some good pedestrianized areas in the city beyond just downtown. Next slide. And so this is an area, this was a demonstration that we ran in Rosendale Square on Birch Street, where we found another sort of a full street that didn't necessarily need to be vehicle dominated. And so what we did here, so this space will be built out more permanently this summer, where we will once again sort of paint it in a similar fashion to the Chinatown project. But this one was, there were some skeptics in the neighborhood, and they were unsure about what this kind of process would be like, or what this kind of space would be like. And so instead of, well, I guess we are all here at a meeting on a Wednesday night, we decided to show people what the space would be like for a week. And that would help us reach a wider audience, and also ensure that some of the folks that were not too excited about changing their mind, local business owners in particular, could actually sit and experience the place and talk to their customers about the space in the space itself. And so in doing that, when I had some nice contentious meetings with some skeptics, as kids are playing behind us, as their neighbors are stopping by to say hello, it really helped build a lot of support for the space. And so we are looking particularly and have a fair amount of funding set aside for new spaces like this. And so we're looking to grow to every neighborhood in the city for these types of spaces. And how we identified this space is that there had been block parties here before, put on by the Main Streets District and local merchants. And so in thinking, when you have a block party somewhere, you sort of already know how to close it off to cars. And so you can think about it in that way. I've found other places where we do Christmas tree lightings, or we have that summer barbecue with BCYF. Those are spaces where we can start to say, all right, people know what it's like for one day. How can I take it to a week? And then how can we take it to a year? And what's really great about spaces like this is it works best when there's some business champions. So shopkeepers and store owners and someone that runs a barber shop or a restaurant or something like that. So anyone, I imagine the group here is maybe a bit more from the resident side of things, but those business owners, those shops that you go to all the time in the neighborhood, chatting about how public space can be used differently and street space is really crucial. Next slide. And so how we've seen that turn out in a ton would be a ton this past year has been outdoor dining. And so we have seen restaurant owners take over parking spaces across the city. These are a couple of my favorites in Hyde Square and in East Boston. And boom, it happened overnight. The city set up a very easy process for folks to reimagine this public space. And so now we want to think about, we enabled restaurants to make that change, and sort of people understood it. And now we're really just acclimating to it returning another year, and maybe just continuing for years to come. How can we think about those spaces in other ways for other types of uses as well? Next slide. And so lastly, I guess that would bring me to things a bit more in the residential realm of things. So one, I would say the project, like I showed you in Chinatown, there are spaces in residential neighborhoods that have the thing that I'm constantly looking for is like little dead end streets, or streets that have triangles and things like that, because it usually means that there's an element of the roadway network that maybe is underutilized. And so we're working on a project right now in the Garrison Trotter area, and we're have worked on a project on Gove Street in East Boston to sort of find little segments of residential streets to create more public space that would be more akin to a park. And then these two projects, the street dynamic doesn't actually change at all. Folks can still drive on these streets, and they're still parking on these streets. But these two examples are areas where we were looking to add, one, bring neighbors together, and neighbors came to us wanting to come together on Franklin Street and in Codman Square to do a community paint day, sort of led by an artist, but then also to be able to say this space is ours, and sort of every car trying to zoom down it is more of a guest on this space, as opposed to the car just zooming from one neighborhood to another, sort of dominating it. And so we also have funding available for street murals. So if there's a group of neighbors, we like particularly larger groups of folks. So if a group of folks want to petition or gather together, or you're having your hopefully summer activities and things, and are brainstorming a potential space, It's a great way to bring together neighbors together. And then particularly for when we've seen kids take part, seeing like a 8-year-old, 9-year-old kid being able to help paint that, and then they get to walk by it every day and say like, I made that mark on that street, is a really wonderful experience. So I'll put my my website in the chat, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, Jacob. Okay, next up we have the arts department.
Hi everyone, Julia Ryan here again. Nice to see you all, and thanks for joining us tonight. So I work in the Mayor's Office of Arts and Culture, and we are the City of Boston's kind of arts focused department. And we are a team of, I think maybe 13 or so people now, which is really exciting. Our office kind of became an office about 6-ish years ago now, and we work on carrying forward a cultural plan for Boston, which is called Boston Creates, which is a 10-year plan that I wanted to just share with you guys sort of the general goals of. But our work kind of spans a lot of different things in the arts and in cultural work, from supporting local arts organizations to supporting artists. And when we say artists, we don't just mean someone with a paintbrush. We mean musicians, we mean performers, we mean culture workers, we mean kind of anyone across the span of the arts. And then we run a bunch of programs around kind of focusing on supporting arts and culture in Boston as well. Next slide. So when it comes to open space, there are kind of 3 ways I want to dive into today quickly that our office would sort of intersect with you or an organization who wants to activate open space. And the things I want to focus on today are public art, grants, and also just ways of staying in touch, finding support for your event or your activation, and resources that might support it. So first off, I'll talk a little bit about public art. So our office, we are a kind of an umbrella office that administers a lot of different programs, but we also administer 2 commissions in the city, or a council actually, and a commission. We oversee the administration of the Boston Cultural Council, which is our city's cultural council, which works on grants for local arts organizations and cultural organizations. And we also administer the Boston Art Commission, which is the city's public art commission. And the Public Art Commission is run kind of by our team, but also has a lot of commissioners who are appointed by the mayor and are kind of involved in different arts and cultural organizations throughout the city. And they meet once a month, every second Tuesday of every month. And they have a public meeting that anyone can attend. Those have been virtual this year, but we really welcome people to come and get to know kind of what they're up to and what's going on in public arts in Boston. And basically what they do is they review applications for public art projects, and they kind of weigh in on the strengths of the proposals and any questions or concerns they might have, and ways that they could be helpful for the people who are proposing them. So that's kind of the general gist of the Art Commission. But some of the programs that are kind of within the public art realm in our office are we have several programs that focus on funding new public art in Boston. So the biggest one is called Percent for Art, which is a program that basically puts aside a percentage of our city's capital construction budget every year toward creating new permanent pieces of public art that, when I say permanent, we mean we aren't only funding the creation of these pieces, but we're also funding taking care of those pieces in perpetuity. And then we have some smaller programs like our Transformative Public Art Project and also our Paintbox program that really focus on allowing people in Boston who live here and work here to create more kind of community-driven public art in their neighborhoods, and also have opportunities to get paid to practice creating public art in their neighborhoods as well. So these are just some examples of kind of some of those projects. Next slide. So when you're applying for public art, as I think it was Shari earlier mentioned, if you have a community-driven public art project, you're always going to want to obviously work with your neighbors, work with your community, and get folks on board. So really working collaboratively with your community and knowing that you have everyone's support behind you and that people are really bought into the project is really important. And if you are interested in creating public art on public property in Boston, that's owned by the city, you're going to have to submit an application to our public art commission to basically have them review your proposal. So you can find that application on our website, and it's going to kind of walk you through various requirements that you'll have to do around like finding a space, making sure you have insurance, making sure you have community buy-in, and figuring out like which departments at the city that you might need to work with to make sure that that project can move forward. So I really encourage everyone to visit our website where you can learn more about the Public Art Commission, the application to create public art, and when the meetings are and how you can get involved, whether you're an art lover or you're an artist or you're an arts organization. Next slide. And something else I actually wanted to mention is that when we say creating public art, we don't necessarily just mean, creating a memorial or creating a sculpture or a monument. We also mean creating murals, having arts events. So anything that's kind of arts focused and it's going to be on city owned land, we would want to hear about it and just help you along with the process and make sure you know which kind of departments you might need to work with or permits you might need, and make sure that we have you going through our application process to create public art in those spaces, and also helping you understand if you actually don't need to go through that process, because sometimes you don't need to. So we're always there to help, and we're always happy to hear from you, and I'll definitely drop our contact information and our website into the chat. But then after our kind of public art focus, we also we do a lot of kind of supporting local artists and supporting local arts lovers and arts organizations through our office. So I do bi-monthly office hours where anyone can sign up and we can just talk about whatever it is that you're interested in learning more about. And we also have 2 newsletters from our office that focus on getting the word out about arts and cultural events happening in Boston, workshops, opportunities, grant opportunities, stuff like that. And also things that artists in Boston would really want to know about that might be supportive of their work, whether they're a visual artist or a dancer or a musician, what have you. And in addition to that, we have social media channels on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and our handle is just Arts in Boston. So I'll drop that in the chat as well. And then, of course, if you want to be in touch with us just generally, and we can help you maybe figure out whatever you're planning, we're always happy to hear from people at our arts@boston.gov email address. So I'll share that in the chat. Next slide. I think I might have another one. Yes, so those are our social accounts. And lastly, I don't have a slide about this, but I did just want to say that our office has several grants that are supportive of activating open space. One that's really important, probably the best one for anyone to know about here, is our Opportunity Fund grant. So that's a grant that's up to $1,000 that supports artists basically either seeding opportunities to kind of grow their careers in Boston, whether that's attending a professional development opportunity or maybe buying new equipment for your studio, getting pieces framed for an upcoming exhibit. It could be kind of anything that's defined by you as meaningful for your career. And then also the Opportunity Fund is a great way to support a local open space activation. So if you are planning something that gets the community together and shares kind of arts and allows artists to share their work and people in Boston can benefit from it, then the Opportunity Fund is actually a really great grant to use to plan something like that. So that grant is open right now and it closes on June 4th, and we are really excited to get more applicants for that. So I will just drop that into the chat as well. But I think that's everything on our end for today, and I'm happy to answer questions at the end.
Thank you, Julia. And next up, we have New Urban Mechanics.
Hey there. So I am Michael from the Mayor's Office of New Urban Mechanics, and we're going to kind of quickly go through the slides. I put a few too many up there, but if we can go to the next slide. So we're the city's research and development team based at City Hall. And next slide. And we partner with community groups, residents, and city departments to reimagine the future of city services and infrastructure. And next slide. Okay, and so practically what that means is that we work with our partners to implement and test new ideas in Boston. So sometimes that means providing design feedback or finding operational partners or solving permitting issues, basically whatever it takes to get a project done. But it's easiest to illustrate with an example. And so back in 2013, we met a group of students at the MIT Media Lab who prototyped a bench with embedded solar panels. And the idea was to provide extra seating in public spaces and the opportunity to charge your phone at that space. And here's a picture of the team at the first installation site on the Rose Kennedy Greenway. And we worked with the team on providing design feedback and help with permitting at the time. Next slide. And so about a year later, the design team incorporated as a company called SUFA. They redesigned the bench, and we worked with the Parks Department to get them installed in several parks throughout Boston. So this is just an idea. This is how we help groups of people scale their ideas, for example. Next slide. And along the way, the designers even took the bench down to an event called Maker Faire at the White House, and they continue to work on products for cities to this day. So next slide. So basically, just the first point of action is, if you have an idea that you would like to test, let us know. We have office hours every Tuesday afternoon. And the best way is to reach us at this email address, newurbanmechanics@boston.gov. Next slide. So the next thing I wanted to highlight is an immediate opportunity with our office and our partner Public Works around community compost. And so this is going way back to 2011, 2012. We started working with the Environment Department on something called Project Oscar, which is a community compost pilot. So the gist is that people can drop off their food scraps at community bins. The scraps get picked up and eventually become fertilizer. And so it's a way for us to reduce the amount of waste going to landfills, and it helps us achieve our zero waste goals. So there are two things I'd like to mention. Maybe go next slide, I think. So the first thing is that we currently have 5 drop-off sites for compost in the city, but we're planning to significantly expand the program this summer. And so the first step is this survey. It's a map-based survey in several languages at this website, boston.gov/Project Oscar. And basically just tell us where you would like to see a bin. You can give us, Caroline, I can see, yeah, I saw, okay. So Caroline, if you went to the website, you could tell us the exact location on the survey. There's a map there for you to really pinpoint it for us, and we'd love to see that. Great, thanks. And so that's the first thing I wanted to mention is let us know where you would like to see the bins, and we will definitely be using that information when we come up with the final sites this summer. Next slide. So the next thing I wanted to mention is that we're about to launch a design competition for compost bins. So we're doing this through our civic design competition called the Public Space Invitational. And maybe next slide. Yeah. So on May 3rd, we're going to open up the design competition for improved compost bins. And the idea is that we're going to fund proposals that are going to help us solve several issues that we've been having with the compost bins. Here are some rudimentary 3D renderings of the bins, and some of the issues that we've been having with the bins include things like, we need to make them more accessible. We need to make them easier to use. We also need to reduce contamination in compost. And because this is a really big issue when you actually have to start making the fertilizer, you can't have, typical trash or that sort of thing in the bins. So contamination has been a really big pain point for the city when processing the compost. Next slide. So keep an eye out on this URL, space.newurbanmechanics.org. This is where we're going to have the call for proposals for the design competition. And just to be clear, this is a funded opportunity for designers to help us rethink compost bins in the city. And that's all I got.
Thank you, Mike. We are going to roll right over to our next presenters from the Boston Parks Department.
Hi, everyone. Again, my name's Nora from the Boston Parks Department, and I'm joined by my colleague, Christine Brandeo. And just wanted to tell you a little bit more about the Parks Department. Our mission as a department is to maintain clean, green, and accessible open space throughout the city. For those of you who don't know, we're located at 1010 Mass Ave as a department, and when we're not in a park, but the main goal of our department is to sort of just maintain. We have over 220-ish parks throughout the city, totaling in like 2,300 acres of parkland. And our goal is to sort of, one, always be maintaining the actual parks themselves, along with some other assets like golf courses and cemeteries. And when we're not doing that, what we're trying to do is program those spaces. So I just wanted to show you guys some examples of the types of programming we do as a department. A lot of it has sort of varied since COVID began, since we were a very in-person heavy department when it came to programming. But just wanted to let you guys know that these are the types of programming we're doing, as well as sort of just open up a conversation to see if you guys had any ideas about future programming. But as you can see, from the top middle photo, where we do a lot of park cleanups in different spaces, whether that be an urban wild or a neighborhood park. Also in the top right photo, as you can see, we did the socially distant seating in some of our parks. We partnered with Michael and the New Urban Mechanics, as well as the mural crew on this one. So this was sort of an idea that we had this past summer when we realized we weren't all going to be able to come together, and how can we still activate a park while staying safe. So this was an idea that we came up with. And it was a fairly easy lift. And it didn't take too long or that many resources, but it was a fairly successful pilot program that we launched. When it's not COVID times, we try to have a lot of in-person programming, especially during the summer months. We do arts and craft workshops, movie nights, and then we also do concerts in the parks. And these are all free events that we put on as our department for city residents. And these are just some types of programming that we do. If you want to go to the next slide, these are programs that we do like when we can all be together. But recently we've been trying to pivot to more installations that we can do in our parks that families can enjoy. sort of on your own time, and it's not going to you're not going to have a big crowd that goes to it, but it's just a simple idea that we had. This is our story walk installation that we just did 10 different parks in 9 different languages, where you essentially just set up a picture book in a park. And it's just an idea of an installation that we were able to get together fairly quickly. And it's something that people can enjoy on their own time. And yeah, I think as a department, we're always trying to maintain our parks, but we're also looking to activate them in fun and creative ways. And my colleague Christine can talk about one of the best ways that we're able to activate these parks is by partnering with different friends groups. So Christine, do you want to just talk about?
Yes, sure. So we have, I want to say, over 30 something friends groups, which essentially a friends group is kind of like a mini neighborhood group, which is like there are eyes and ears of the park, as well as they activate the park. So they can have their own cleanups. They do small projects to revitalize the park that they're a group friends to. So we always looking for more partnerships. So if you want to join, we have a link in the screen. So we would love for you to partner with us. Yeah. Nora?
Yeah, and
I'm sorry, Tom, yes, a friends group does need to be a city-owned park.
And yeah, if you have any questions about programs that are coming up, we have, like all the other departments, we have our monthly newsletter that you can sign up for by just going to boston.gov/parks. And then if you also want to follow us on social media, it's just Boston Parks Department. And if you have an idea for an activation, we're always open to hearing new ideas. We're a small team, so the more the merrier in our minds.
Yes. And if you want to join a friends group, or you want to know if there's a friends group in your area, using that link will help you navigate that as well.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Christine. This is all of their social media as discussed. And if you guys don't follow them, you really should. They do a great job of promoting, and they always have really fun competitions going on. I know for Christmas, it was really fun, and they have some really cool partnerships. So in respect of everyone's time, I do want to say thank you again. We held everybody's attention, so I really do appreciate it. I know that there were a few questions that were dropped into the chat that we were able to answer along the way. However, I do want to open up the floor for any questions that you may have. Don't be nervous. No question is a dumb question, and you may be surprised someone else may actually have that question as well. And before we do that, I will let you know again about our office, some opportunities that we have coming up. So we do host we offer cleanup year round, but we have a big spring cleanup that was formerly known as Boston Shines and is now called the Love Your Block Spring Cleanups. And we offer them citywide based on your neighborhood. It is offered on a certain day. And if maybe your business wants to do it, or if a school or educational facility wants to do it, we do offer a Friday date as well. And those dates are coming up. So May 1st and May 15th. However, if you go on right now, you may see that the registration is closed. Feel free to just email me afterwards, and we can kind of discuss and see what that looks like. As everyone knows, COVID has kind of put limitations on things for all of us. And our social media handles can be found here. If you guys would like to know about the next one, or if you have an idea about what our next Civic Academy should be about that you feel like you would be interested, or maybe your friends and other residents have been asking about, we would love to know more about that. And so you guys can drop that in the chat as well. And so now I'm going to open it up for any questions. So while we have our panelists, the experts, if you have any questions, go ahead and take yourself off mute.
Hi, my name is Maddie Cropley. I'm actually a librarian at the Boston Public Library. I was actually wondering what it sort of looked like to, the sort of interdepartmental work. Like for instance, what Jacob was talking about, like sort of some of the parklets and stuff like that. I mean, like, what does it sort of look like to work with another department to maybe either use those spaces or maybe create a space together or something? I don't know.
We are all ears. I am on calls with everyone who's on this panel weekly, if not daily. So I feel like we're constantly, while we sort of have our jurisdictional silos, and like something will be owned by parks or something will be owned by D&D and something will be a transportation department and public works street. Nora's got skills about how to do things in parks that might be more appropriate than the street right adjacent to it, but we want to make sure that the crosswalk is safe to get there. And then like all the arts work that we do is in cooperation with the arts department. So I'm doing some projects with BPL right now, but I think we're particularly thinking about sidewalks or sort of some of that space led mostly by newer mechanics. I don't know if Michael knows more about that project, but yeah, I think the whole point of sort of thinking about public space in a collaborative, big picture way is that lots of departments need to work together because we all have our expertise and our sort of domain and even sometimes flexible funding. So the Paint Box art program is like funded via Public Works, and then it's painted on transportation and Public Works boxes, but the artists are coordinated by the Arts and Culture Department, and they do outreach to the community of artists to seek out muralists. So lots of moving parts.
Yes, Jacob, I'll just add to that. Like, we have funded in the past through Friends of Groups. We have funded both library projects. We did the Common Square Library garden projects a few years ago. And then we have done a few Friends of Groups for parks who have come to us for small funding through the Love Your Block mini grant program. So there are definitely ways to work. We would love to, obviously, a lot of the times, as Jacob said, like the conversations we have may not be with the direct librarians, which is what my team is going to be looking to do and expand on, because a lot of like the teachers, librarians and things like that, people who may not be on the phone calls that I may be on, are the ones who really know what the community want and how some things can be accessed. So always looking for either internal and external partnerships for sure. Thank you, Maddie. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Appreciate it.
Any other questions? I know there are a few going on in the chat. Anyone else want to hop off mute?
Yeah, it's Tom. I've got one for you guys. Tom, ready? So guys, to do any of these activities in a registered landmark district in the city, so I happen to be part of the neighborhood association over in the South Boston waterfront, and one of the areas is at Fort Point, which is a landmark district. Does the neighborhood association need to bring the idea and all of the things about what art, if it was art, what the art would look like, if it's painting a box, what that would be like, if it's the creation of a parklet, how that would look? I mean, who brings it in front of landmarks to get it approved, I guess? Have you guys ever done anything in a landmark district? And is there an easy way of getting that done, I guess, is the question. Thank you. Don't all answer at once now.
Yeah.
I don't want to dominate the conversation, but I've been there. So some things are not under the domain of the landmarks district. Each one has its own particular enabling legislation about what's in its control. Yep. And so some, like for example, there are paint boxes that have been done in the South End that didn't go through landmarks, but were just painted. Other ones actually did go through landmarks and they said they were fine. So, but like parklets, for example, just streets are not in the jurisdiction of those commissions, and so they're more about the buildings themselves. Mm-hmm. but I also think things temporary in nature, like murals that are temporary for a few years that then may last longer than that, can squeak by. Normally it would be whoever's paying for the project would be the organization that is bringing it to the commission, whether that's a government agency or an outside entity.
Okay,
And
thanks.
I'll just, Tom, I'll add to that. It's Julia from the Arts Department. In terms of like murals or paint box projects, or I've seen some mosaic projects that have had to go before Landmark Commission in the past, but basically what we've done when this has happened is we've usually, once the artist, if this were like an artist-led project, had a plan for, you know, whether it was a mural or paint box or what have you, we have internally brought that that plan to Landmarks to get advice from them on whether it would need to be reviewed by their commission or not. And then we've generally just directed whomever is doing the project, like the artist in this case, for example, on, you know, who to be in touch with in Landmarks and like how to get it through that review process.
Okay, thank you, Julia.
Thank you, Tom. Did that answer your question?
It did, yeah. So it's got some, you know, in our particular neighborhood, quite a bit of the streets and are kind of either privately owned or owned by other state agencies. So as we sit down and strap our thinking caps on about how do we get creative, we have to take the limited number of streets that we think we could try to do something with, city-owned streets, and then in most of those, well, all of those are probably in the landmark district. So, yeah, thank you.
No problem. Any additional questions?
My name is Bill Raelt. I just wanted to first off say thank you to all the panelists. This has been super informative. And I guess, is this going to be posted? Because I'd love for some of my neighbors to see this. So that's one question I had. And then the other, just to get the other question was sort of about, I'm kind of obsessed with introducing more mid-block crosswalks in the city, and I think it could be facilitated too by you know, whatever you call, you know, mini medians or pedestrian refuge areas that I've seen some examples that have been really creative in other cities, and I've of course got one particular crosswalk in mind, but I'd like to see others happen. And if there were any sort of examples of that or thoughts about that, I guess.
Go ahead.
Oh, feel free to shoot a line to btd@boston.gov with the specific area you have in mind. A big thing for us is always that any crosswalk needs to have handicap compliant ramps that lead into it. And so that's often what makes it difficult to add new crosswalks somewhere. But particularly through Boston's Slow Streets program has been a great way to sort of increase those types of treatments. But there's other spot improvements we'll make here and there, just if the site demands it. So feel free to shoot us a line. And we are using, you know, paint, flex posts, trying to now work to like paint those non-vehicular areas different colors and things like that, so that they're a bit more beautiful than sort of a standard plasticky looking thing. Yeah, so shoot us a line.
Great, thank you. And this will be posted, okay.
Yes, so this will be recorded, and someone from my team will be, as a follow-up email, you will receive the recording within that email, and then you will also figure out whether or not it will be up on our website. I know other departments, I believe, for like zoning and things like that, it is up on a YouTube channel. So one way or another, it is going to be available to the public after this.
Great, thank you.
No problem. Any other questions? No, okay. Dahlia or Josh, if someone wanted to, if there were any questions that kind of stuck out to you that people dropped in the chat, you felt like could be helpful. I know we may have some people that are on an iPhone or a phone in general and may not be able to kind of see the chat box. So if there's anything that stuck out, we can maybe answer one or two questions that were in the chat.
I think everything was answered for the most part. The only one that I don't think was answered was a question from Julia, and she said, what does the fertilizer end up going toward? And I think that was for the Boston Parks Department.
I think Michael actually addressed
Okay.
that one. Thank you, Michael. I was just curious. Appreciate that.
Yep.
Okay, great. Well, we want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. Again, if you are interested or have an idea for what the next Civic Academy could be about, what you feel like you would like to know more about that the city does, again, activating space can happen in more than one ways, right? So whether it be a cleanup, mural, art, even a tester project could be in a parking space. There are a number of resources available. We need your ideas in order to make these things come to light. And we just look forward to kind of seeing the next steps after this. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thanks. Have a good one.
Thank you. Bye.
Good night.